The girl by the fence. The sound of the wind was the only thing that acknowledged her existence. She lay motionless at the edge of a dusty road in the middle of nowhere, a nameless stretch of gravel slicing through a forgotten corner of the Midwest. Her face was smeared with blood and dirt, her arms bruised from shoulder to wrist. One shoe was missing. Her lips were cracked, her eyes barely open. Dried tears streaked her cheeks. But it wasn't the injuries that hurt the most. It was the sign. A piece of cardboard had been duct-taped across her chest, crudely scrawled in black marker. Useless mouth, as if that's all she was worth. She had stopped trying to cry. The tears had run out hours ago, or maybe it had been a day. Time had blurred. She remembered screaming, hands cold metal, the feeling of being thrown from a vehicle like garbage. Then silence. A truck had passed earlier. It slowed for just a second, but the driver had taken one look and sped off. She didn't blame him. People didn't stop for trash, just when she was sure this was how she would die alone. Dirty and labeled, a low rumble broke the stillness. Another truck. An old one. It slowed, dust swirling in its wake. Then it stopped. A door opened, boots crunched over gravel. She didn't dare look up, didn't want to see more disgust in another stranger's eyes. She shut her eyes tighter. Then silence again. No one shouted. No one pulled her up roughly. No one spit or cursed. Instead, she felt a shadow fall across her face, blocking the sun. She opened her eyes. Just a sliver. A man stood over her, older, weathered, grey flannel shirt tucked into faded jeans, cowboy hat pulled low over tired eyes. His hands were large, his knuckles scarred. His face held no expression, neither kindness nor cruelty. He knelt beside her. She flinched, but he didn't touch her. Instead, he gently reached toward the sign and peeled back the duct tape with a slow, deliberate motion. She winced but didn't resist. He didn't look at her like the others had. When he finally pulled the sign free, he stared at it for a long moment, then crumpled it in his hand. "People who write things like that," he muttered, his voice low and gravelly, "don't deserve to speak." Without another word, he scooped her up into his arms. She wanted to fight, but she was too tired, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something close to safe. When she woke, it was dark. The smell of firewood, tobacco, and something faintly sweet hung in the air. A blanket covered her. Her wounds had been cleaned. A bandage pressed against her temple. She tried to sit up. Pain screamed through her ribs. "Don't!" The voice came from the corner. She turned her head slowly. There he was, the same man sitting in a worn leather chair by the fireplace. His hat was off now. A thin scar ran from the side of his jaw down his neck. His eyes, dark and heavy, were locked on the flames. "You need rest." Her throat was dry. Why did you help me?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, would you have preferred I left you there?" She looked away. "No." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Then don't ask questions you already know the answer to." Silence fell between them. "You didn't ask for my name," she whispered. "You didn't offer it." "I'm Ellie." He nodded once. "Name's Thomas." The days passed slowly. He didn't talk much. She learned quickly that he lived alone. A small ranch tucked between two hills, miles from the nearest town. No cell signal, no internet, just horses, fields, a few chickens, and silence. He left food outside her door, made her tea when her fever spiked, sat on the porch in the evenings, smoking hand-rolled cigarettes while the dogs slept at his feet. She watched him from the window. She didn't know what he was hiding, but it was clear he was carrying something. A weight, a memory, something that made him look like a man who had buried too much to ever feel light again. On the third night, she limped outside to sit with him. He didn't speak, just handed her a wool blanket and scooted a chair toward her. Sat like that for hours, watching stars. "Do you always pick up strangers by the side of the road?" She finally asked, half joking. "No." "Then why me?" He took a drag from his cigarette. "Because I knew someone once, who was thrown away the same way." Ellie looked at him, who he didn't answer, just stared at the horizon. By the fifth day, she could walk better, still sore, still healing, but alive. The bruises were fading, her thoughts a little clearer. That morning, she stepped outside and froze. The truck was gone. Panic rose like a flood. She ran barefoot across the field to the barn. Empty. The horses were fed, saddled, but Thomas was nowhere. Her heart thudded wildly. He left without a word. What if he handed me over? What if the people who hurt me? She stopped. Up the hill, Past the stable was a small wooden gate, a path she hadn't seen before. Curiosity overpowered fear. She followed it. At the top of the hill stood a lone wooden cross, weathered, hand-carved, faded letters etched into the grain. Mariah Jameson, forever 12. Her breath caught. Jameson. Her name. No one here knew her full name. She hadn't said it. She hadn't used it in years. Mariah had been her sister. She had died when Ellie was just 11. They said it was an accident, drowning. But Ellie knew better. Mariah had been taken, used, broken. And the people who did it got away. No one had believed her. Not even her parents. No one except their shadow fell over the grave. She turned. Thomas stood behind her. His face was unreadable. But his eyes, they were brimming with something ancient and sharp. Grief, regret, recognition. "I built that," he said quietly. Her voice shook. "How do you know this name?" He didn't blink. "I was there." Ellie stumbled back, her breath catching. "What do you mean you were there?" she asked, voice rising. "You were there when she died. Who were you?" Thomas didn't answer. Instead, he pulled something from his back pocket, a photograph, old, faded. He handed it to her. In the picture, two girls sitting on a porch swing, laughing. A younger man, a little older than a teenager, stood behind them, holding a guitar. His smile was soft, familiar. Her jaw dropped. "That's Mariah and me." He nodded. "And me." Her hands shook. "You were our neighbor. I remember now. You used to bring candy, play music." He looked down, and I failed her. "No," she whispered. "You moved away." "I didn't move. I disappeared. I saw things I didn't understand, until it was too late." Tears stung her eyes. He continued. "When I heard what happened, I came back. But you were gone. Your parents had left. I couldn't find you. I thought, maybe you died too." "I almost did," she said. "I ran away a year ago. I've been hiding, until they found me again." He clenched his jaw. "Did they do that to you?" She nodded slowly. He turned away, fists tightening at his sides. "I should have protected both of you." "You didn't know," she said softly. "I should have." They stood in silence for a long time. Then she reached out and took his hand. For a man who hadn't spoken more than 10 words a day, he suddenly looked like someone who had a lot left to say. But he only said this: "They won't touch you again." That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. Too many questions, too many memories. She crept into the living room and found him at the fireplace again, the flames painting gold onto the floorboards. "Why do you live out here alone?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Because when you lose the people you love, the noise of the world becomes unbearable." She nodded. "I know that feeling." He finally looked at her. "Do you remember what Mariah used to call you?" She blinked. "Yeah, she called me Star, because you were her light." Ellie smiled through tears. Thomas looked into the fire. "You still are." Buried names, buried wounds. The morning sun crept over the hills, painting golden light across the ranch. Horses stirred in the stables. The rooster crowed once, as if hesitant to break the silence that had settled like dust on everything. Inside the small wooden cabin, Ellie stood quietly in front of the mirror in the bathroom. She traced her fingers over the fading bruise on her jaw, her reflection pale and tired but no longer hollow. Her wounds were healing, but something deeper still throbbed beneath her ribs. Memories she'd locked away were rushing back. The grave, the photograph, Mariah's name on that cross, and Thomas, the silent rancher with eyes full of guilt and secrets. She had known him. Once, he'd been kind, a quiet teenager who played guitar on his porch and brought chocolate bars for her and Mariah. Then one day, he was just gone. And weeks later, Mariah was found dead. Everyone said it was an accident. Ellie always knew it wasn't. She walked into the kitchen and found a note on the table in neat handwriting. "Back before lunch. Feed the horses if you feel up to it. Eggs on the stove. Tea." He didn't sign Thomas, just tea. The eggs were still warm. Her stomach growled. She sat down slowly, ate in silence, and watched the wind brush the tall grass outside. It was peaceful here. Almost too peaceful, like the world had stopped spinning. And for now, she was okay with that. Later that afternoon, she wandered out to the barn. The horses snorted when she entered. She moved slowly, cautiously, but they didn't seem afraid of her. She poured oats into their troughs, ran her fingers through a chestnut mare's mane. She couldn't help but smile. "I always wanted a horse when I was little," she whispered. "You still do." She turned sharply. Thomas stood in the doorway. his shadow long across the dirt floor. "I thought you were gone," she said, heart skipping. He walked in, hands in pockets. "Had to check the north fence. Coyotes broke through again." She nodded. "You live all the way out here, by yourself? No family? No one left?" he replied flatly. She studied him for a moment. "You never married?" He shook his head. "Some people shouldn't. Not when they're built the way I am." "What do you mean?" "I'm not someone who talks much," he said, looking past her. "And I carry things that get heavy for other people." Ellie took a deep breath. "I think I can handle heavy." He smiled barely. A flickered dot. Then he walked over to the hay bales, sat down, and gestured for her to join him. She did. For the next hour, Thomas told her what had happened after Mariah's death. How he had found her crying one day near the woods. How she said something strange was happening at home. That certain guests made her uncomfortable. She begged him not to tell anyone. And he hadn't. He had been 17, confused, afraid of starting something he didn't understand, so he said nothing. Then weeks later, Mariah went missing. By the time her body was found near a lake, it was too late. Ellie's parents had covered everything up, claimed it was an accident, moved away in the middle of the night, vanished without a trace. "I tried to report it after," Thomas said, his voice heavy. "But they said there wasn't enough evidence, said the family was already gone, that it was settled." He looked at her. "I should have protected her, protected you." Tears slipped down Ellie's cheek. "You were a kid too." "No," he said. "I was old enough to know better." She reached over and touched his hand, and for once, he didn't pull away. That night, over dinner, Ellie told her side of the story, about the years after Mariah's death, how her parents became colder, angrier, how her father lost his job and started drinking, how strange men would come by the house at night, and how, one day, she ran. She lived in shelters, couch-surfed with strangers, worked under-the-table jobs, but trouble always found her. 6 months ago, she was picked up by a man who claimed to be a friend of the family. He said her parents were looking for her. He said they missed her. He wasn't lying. They wanted her back, not as a daughter, but as property, something to be passed around. Silenced, sold. She managed to escape 2 weeks ago, jumped out of a moving van, that's how she ended up by the fence, with a sign across her chest. Thomas's hands trembled as she told him everything. "Don't have to carry this anymore," she said softly. "None of it was your fault." His jaw clenched, but his eyes softened. Days passed. The fear that had haunted Ellie began to fade. She started brushing the horses every morning, cooking dinner in the evenings, sitting with Thomas on the porch under the stars. They rarely spoke about the past now. They didn't have to dot it, lived in the spaces between them. But so did something else. Trust. One morning, while sweeping the porch, Ellie found a small wooden box beneath the stairs. It was dusty, locked, and oddly heavy. Curious, she brought it inside and waited for Thomas to return. When he did, he stared at the box like it had claws. "Where did you find that?" he asked. "Under the porch," she replied. It looked important. He took it from her hands and sat down slowly. After a long pause, he opened it. Inside were papers, old YELLOWED. Photos, journal entries, a small cassette tape. Ellie leaned closer. "What is all this?" Thomas picked up the tape. "It's Mariah's voice. I recorded her once. She was singing." Ellie's breath caught. "You still kept it?" He nodded. "It's the only recording I have. I've never played it since she died." "Can we?" she whispered. He hesitated, then nodded again. They found an old tape player in the attic, dusted it off, popped the tape in, crackling, static. Then a voice, Mariah's voice, high and clear, singing a soft lullaby, off-key, giggling between verses. Ellie covered her mouth as the tears came. Thomas just sat there, eyes closed, listening. When the tape ended, the silence was sacred, like they had just touched something holy. That night, Ellie woke from a nightmare, sweating, heart pounding. She had dreamt of the van, the men, the tape across her mouth. She walked to the living room and found Thomas already awake, staring out the window. "They'll come looking," she said, trembling. "They always do." He turned to her slowly. "Then let them come." She frowned. "You don't understand who they are." "No," he said. "You don't understand who I am." She blinked. Thomas stepped closer, eyes burning now. "I let evil win once. I will not let it happen again." His voice was sharper than she'd ever heard, fierce, final. And suddenly, she believed him. But the past wasn't done with them yet. 2 days later, a black SUV appeared at the end of the road. It didn't pull up to the house. It just sat there watching. Ellie saw it first. Her blood ran cold. They found me. Thomas walked outside without hesitation, shotgun in hand. The SUV peeled off, tires spitting gravel as it vanished down the road. But the message was clear. They knew where she was, and they'd be back. That evening, Thomas began locking every door, reinforcing windows, moving things around the barn. He didn't speak, but his body moved like a man preparing for something inevitable. Ellie watched him. "Thomas," she said, voice trembling, What if this doesn't end well?" He paused. Then he turned to her, and for the first time since she arrived, he looked her in the eye without flinching. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said, then added softly, "Not this time." The van returns at midnight. The wind had a sharpness that night, whispering secrets across the dry grass, as if warning the ranch to stay awake. Inside the cabin, Ellie couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees, watching. The shadows stretched and twitched across the floor. Every creak of the wood felt like footsteps, every gust of wind like someone breathing behind the door. Thomas had fallen into a light doze on the couch with a shotgun across his lap. He hadn't spoken much since the black SUV appeared and then vanished like a bad omen. But his silence had changed. It was no longer numb, it was watchful, wired. Ready. Ellie stared at the window and whispered, "They're coming back tonight. I can feel it." Midnight, the moment arrived like a cut. The howl of the wind died suddenly, then the faint sound of tires crunching gravel. Ellie's breath caught. She slipped off the bed and crept to the living room. Thomas was already up, crouched near the window, his jaw tight. He lifted a finger to his lips. She nodded, heart hammering. A black van was parked just outside the main gate. It wasn't the same SUV, but the darkness it brought was worse. The engine idled. 2 doors opened. 3 figures stepped out, dressed in dark jackets, baseball caps pulled low. They didn't look like lost travelers. They looked like professionals, like hunters. Thomas whispered, "Basement, now." "I'm not leaving you, Ellie," he said, finally turning to her. "I need you to trust me." She searched his face, and this time, didn't argue. He guided her to the back hallway and opened a hidden trapdoor under the hallway rug. It led to a narrow cellar beneath the cabin, cold, dusty, but safe. He placed a lantern in her hand and whispered, "Don't come out until I say, no matter what you hear." She grabbed his arm. "Please don't do anything reckless." His hand squeezed hers, then the door shut above her. Darkness swallowed everything but the lantern's dim glow. Above, Thomas moved like a man possessed. He turned off all lights, checked the front lock again, then stepped onto the porch, shotgun slung over his shoulder, heart steady, steps firm. He wasn't just protecting his land, he was standing between Ellie and the devils of her past. The men approached. "Evening," one of them said, smiling too wide. "We're looking for someone. Girl, early 20s, pretty, might have wandered onto your property." Thomas didn't reply. Another man stepped forward. "We've got her parents' permission to retrieve her. She's not well. It's a family matter." Still, Thomas stayed silent. "Sir," the first man said again, more forcefully, "this girl is a danger to herself. If you're hiding her, I'm not." Thomas said at last, voice like gravel, "Then you won't mind if we look around." Thomas raised the shotgun slightly. "You step past that gate," he said, "and I'll consider it trespassing." The 3 men exchanged glances. They hadn't expected a man like this, silent, but not afraid. The third man finally said, "We'll be back, with backup." Thomas nodded once. "Bring whoever you like." They left. Dust curled behind their van like a dying snake. Thomas didn't lower the shotgun until they were gone. Then he walked slowly back inside, locked the door, and opened the cellar. Ellie emerged, pale, shaking. "I heard them. I heard everything." "Who were they?" "Not family," Thomas said. "Not legal." "Then who?" He looked at her. "You know who." Ellie sank onto the floor, her hands pressed to her temples. "They're not going to stop." "No," Thomas said. "But I am." The next morning, Ellie woke to the sound of hammering. She rushed outside and found Thomas boarding up the windows, reinforcing the doors with metal bars and thick planks. "This isn't just a ranch anymore," he said. "It's a fortress. I don't want you to get hurt." "I've been hurt," he said calmly. "Not stopping it, that's what hurt." That afternoon, Thomas handed her a small device, a burner phone. he explained, in case we get separated. He had one too. And this, he added, handing her a folder, is everything I've kept about your sister's case. What I tried to report, what they ignored. Ellie flipped through it, her hands trembling. There were photos, letters, even a voice memo Mariah had recorded on his phone the week before she died, where she hinted about someone coming to the house at night. Ellie covered her mouth in horror. How did they get away with it all? Money, threats, people who didn't want to see what was right in front of them. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep again. She found herself walking into the barn, where the horses stirred softly. She sat down on a hay bale and stared at the rafters, letting the quiet settle over her. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and gasped. A man stood in the barn doorway. Not Thomas, one of them. Before she could scream, he lunged. She kicked, fought, scratched, but he was bigger. Where is the evidence? He snarled. We know he kept it. Where is it? Then a gunshot. The man froze. Blood bloomed on his shoulder. He collapsed sideways, howling. Thomas stood in the doorway, gun raised, face dark with fury. I told you, he said quietly, this isn't your hunting ground anymore. They tied the man up and called the sheriff. But Ellie noticed something in the deputy's eyes when he arrived. Doubt, disbelief, and something else. Fear later. As the man was taken away, the sheriff muttered to Thomas, you're stirring up something that's been buried for a long time, son. Thomas didn't flinch. Maybe it's time we dug it up. Over the next 2 days, the news spread. A man with ties to a human trafficking ring had been found on private property, wounded. The sheriff's department didn't want to release his name, but the local paper did. Ellie saw it on the front page. Father linked a disappearance case in 2010. Her hands shook as she read the article. The man had once been a youth mentor, involved in multiple foster programs, including one run by her own parents. The same man who used to visit their house late at night. She remembered him now, and suddenly, everything made sense. But it wasn't over. The arrest had stirred the hornet's nest. And hornets don't forget. That night, the phone rang. Not the Bernard. The cabin landline. Thomas answered. He listened quietly for a full minute, then hung up. Ellie stared at him. What did they say? He looked at her, eyes burning. They said I have one chance to give you up. She felt cold. And if you don't, he turned toward the window. They'll burn the place down. When the fire came, the truth did tonight. Smelled of smoke before she saw the flames. Ellie had been asleep for less than an hour when Thomas threw the door open. They lit the east field. He said calmly, but his voice carried an urgency that turned her blood cold. We need to move, now. She jumped out of bed, heart pounding, eyes wild. Outside, the wind carried red, not the warm kind, but angry, rising fire, climbing over the dry brush with hunger in its mouth. Thomas handed her the burner phone and a flashlight. Take the trail out back, go through the ravine. There's a ranger cabin about 3 miles out. Wait for me there. She grabbed his arm. No, I'm not leaving you again. He looked at her, jaw clenched. I need to slow them down. Give you time. You carry the truth now. That folder, those tapes, they're the kind of truth people burn barns for. Her fingers gripped his shirt. You're not dying here. His voice dropped. I didn't save Mariah, Ellie, but I'm saving you. She shook her head, tears rising. Don't say goodbye. I'm not, he whispered. I'm saying, I'll see you soon. Then he pressed the bag into her arms and turned toward the blaze. Ellie ran. The trail behind the cabin was barely lit, and the smoke stung her eyes. Embers rained like fireflies from the trees above. She stumbled more than once, but she didn't stop. She clutched the folder tight. Every piece of evidence Thomas had collected over the years. The photos, the cassette, the newspaper clipping, even a flash drive he had added the day before. She remembered what he told her. If anything happens, go to the press. Go to Detective Hall. She's the only one who ever believed me. 3 miles never felt so far. But when the ranger cabin finally came into view, she collapsed onto the porch, gasping, praying Thomas was behind her. He wasn't. Back at the ranch, Thomas stood by the barn, watching the fire approach like it was an old enemy. 2 black SUVs pulled up near the gate. 5 men stepped out, their faces half lit by the flames. One of them clapped. Brave old cowboy, standing alone. Thomas didn't reply. Another sneered. We know the girl's not here. We just want what she took. She didn't take anything, Thomas said flatly. She survived. You don't get to erase that. She talk, the first man said. They always talk, but you won't. The barrel of a gun was raised, but before the trigger could be pulled, sirens screamed. From the road, from the hills, red and blue lights, slicing through the smoke, dozens of headlights, sheriff's cruisers, state troopers, and one unmarked car from the city. Detective Hall stepped out, gun drawn. Step away from him, she barked. The men froze. Drop your weapons, now. They hesitated. Then Thomas raised both hands. Check the barn, he said. You'll find one of them tied up inside. He already confessed. Hall looked at him hard, then signaled her officers. Moments later, the men were surrounded, cuffed, and shoved against the SUVs. The blaze had reached the edge of the fence, but the ranch had survived. Just barely. Ellie was sitting on the ranger porch, knees pulled to her chest, when the radio crackled. Fire's under control. Suspects in custody. The girl is safe. She leaped to her feet. Thomas, is he okay? Static. Then, he's asking for you. 2 hours later, she arrived back at the ranch. Ash blanketed the earth like snow. The barn was scorched but still standing. The horses had been moved. The fences were singed but held. She found him sitting on the porch, a wet cloth pressed to his arm. His face was smudged with soot. His eyes lit up the second he saw her. She ran to him, threw her arms around his chest. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ellie whispered, "You didn't have to be a hero." He held her tighter. "I didn't have a choice." She pulled back. "They arrested them." He nodded. "Every one." "And the man in the barn?" Named names. She swallowed. "My parents. They're already on the run. But now, there's a trail." She took out the folder. "Then let's finish this." 3 days later, Ellie stood in front of a sea of microphones. Hair tied back. Eyes clear. Voice steady. Thomas stood behind her. Detective Hall to her right. "I was trafficked by people who were supposed to love me." Ellie said, "My sister Mariah died trying to escape them. For years, I was told I was worthless, that no one would believe me, but someone did." She turned slightly, tears forming. He was silent, but he listened, and that saved my life. The press asked questions. The headlines exploded. Trafficking survivor comes forward. Local rancher exposes hidden abuse ring. Sister's voice from the grave helps crack 10-year-old case. Arrests followed. Funds were traced. Houses searched. Ellie's parents were caught in Arizona, boarding a private plane. And finally, Mariah's name was cleared. The death certificate was changed, from accidental drowning to homicide. Under investigation months passed. The ranch became a sanctuary, not just for Ellie, but for others, girls who had run, survivors needing safety. Thomas built 3 extra cabins, named one after Mariah. He and Ellie rarely talked about the fire, or the night the barn nearly burned. But they remembered in the way they stood close, without speaking. In the way. Thomas now smiled, truly smiled, when Ellie laughed. One evening, under a soft golden sunset, Ellie brought him a small wrapped package. "What's this?" he asked. She smiled. "Just open it." Inside, a cassette tape. Labeled Mariah's Song Remastered. She had digitized the original, cleaned the audio, added her own guitar behind it. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "So was she," Ellie said, wiping her eyes. They sat on the porch together, playing it through tiny speakers. Her voice danced through the air like wind through wheat. Alive. Free. Unbroken. The end.